Final Fantasy VI has been one of my favorite childhood games, even though us Europeans never got the initial release on the SNES. And considering it's been about 15 years since I last played it, it was obvious to me that the challenge run of the game will be on the horizon eventually. With the Pixel Remasters out for a while, we have quite a few options in terms of challenges, and one that pretty much immediately struck my mind was trying to beat the game without ever gaining experience. The Pixel Remasters have a boost options where you can toggle the amount of experience, AP and guild gained. And while that is mostly used to increase rewards to make the game easy on you, you can also go the opposite way and decrease certain parameters, and that is exactly what we will do today. This run only has one rule, which is keeping the XP boost at 0 so all characters will be stuck with their initial level. And with that we're basically ready to go. As always, I'm writing this as I go through the run, so let's see what kind of surprises are going to await our party on this adventure. But before we start, I'd like to tell you all about a great game who has a big Christmas event going on right now. Not only can you get a free legendary plus 2 strong epic heroes by using my link or scanning my QR code, you can also win $5,000, game consoles, smartphones and $100 Amazon gift cards, as well as lots of other incredible game prizes. All you have to do is download Raid Shadow Legends, yes they obviously sponsor this video, and play the Christmas in Teleria minigame to win. Use my link in the description, head over to xmas.raidrpg.com, enter your raid ID and play to win prizes. Please note that you only have 24 hours to play the event after downloading the game, and it's only eligible through my link, so be quick everybody and get all the prizes. And if this wasn't enough already, there are also strong winter style champions in Raid's in-game index, including my personal favorite Glacia. Glacia's Soul Guide is an excellent counter to champions that increase cooldowns, instead placing freeze debuffs back onto them. If you haven't started yet, click my link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses like the epic champion Ugo. Upon reaching level 15, you'll get another starting pack that includes an epic Fane, and by using the promo code Monkey King, you can also get a legendary champion Sun Wukong for free. The promo code is only available until January the 7th, so be fast. If you've previously played Raid on your mobile device but stopped, we have a special separate welcome back link in the description that grants returning players a bonus package featuring the epic champion Taguar. So again, click my link in the description or scan the QR code to get started and grab all the rewards now. We start the game and go through the opening segment in Narsh. Not really much to say here, this is still pretty much a casual playthrough at this point. I do want to point out that I am really bad with timing however, which led to Emir countering with Megawalt wiping Terra. Good start. To be fair, nobody gets experience anyways, so it doesn't really matter if a party member is down at the end of the battle. After beating the boss, it wasn't long until I made the next mistake. I forgot that certain chests upgrade their loot if you leave them until the World of Ruin, one of them becoming Guard Bracelet with Auto Protect and Shell, which is definitely better than the items we can get at this point. After realizing my mistake, I just decided to start from scratch again, since we were still in the intro sequence anyways, so we go through the Emir fight one more time, and then get to advance the story without opening the chests this time around. Up next is the Saving Terra section with the Mughals. We're going with Locke's party here, since the plan is to steal a Mithril knife from the boss, but before we do that, we switch to Mog's party to unequip both Mithril Spear and Mithril Shield. Mog doesn't need them for now, and it's a nice upgrade to our limited equipment options. The fight against the guard leader is not that special. We try to steal the Mithril knife while the Mughals take out the Silver Lobos. One of the Mughals goes down, but otherwise this is a rather simple battle and we beat the enemy soon after. We grab the items from the adventuring school and then are off to Figaro Castle where we meet Edgar. By the way, in case anybody is wondering, I'm keeping the character names as they are since there are a ton of party members in FF6 and I'm nowhere near creative enough to come up with a good name for each one of them. One thing to note here is that the level of new party members joining always depends on the party's average level at that given time. Since we never gain any experience though, new party members will also join on a much lower level than usual. We raid the castle, stock up on items, as well as buying new tools for Edgar. We get to meet Kefka, who promptly sets the castle on fire, but luckily we already got a backup plan and are now off against 2 match attack armors. And this is the first trickier fight. A laser one-shots Terra, so we're already off to a good start. After some more laser spam, Locke is down as well, and yeah, we get our first game over here. That was faster than I expected it, to be honest, though we got terrible luck on the lasers, so we had to try again. This time Locke survives the laser on 1 HP, and the combination of 2 crossbow attacks and the fire from Terra is enough to beat the first enemy. Afterwards, it's just one more fire, and we're already done again. This is a nice example of what this run is probably going to become. I assume we're going to need quite some luck on certain boss fights in order to be able to make it through, but for now, we're going to continue to South Figaro Cave first. Again, we got a couple of items here that we don't want to pick up due to them getting upgraded later. Once we reach South Figaro, we meet Shadow and also do our first little shopping spree of the run. We go through the hidden passage that will become much more important later on to grab the Hyper Wrist and the Hermes sandals. The Hyper Wrist gives a nice strength boost, but the Hermes sandals are the much more important item here since they give you auto haste, something incredibly good to have this early. We also raid the majority of the chests here for some good money and then make our way to the shops. Considering the majority of the party still has their starting equipment, we upgrade our defense and also grab a couple of anti-poison and petrify accessories. After stocking up on items, we're off into Mount Colds next. In the cave we're looking for a few Sagram, whom we can steal a bandana as a rare steal. Luckily they don't have a common steal, so if you're successful, it will always be a bandana. The rare steal is only a 1 in 8 chance though, so it might take a while. In fact, the first successful steal took me 4 minutes of non-stop stealing. Once we got 3 of those, we continue making our way through the mountain, grabbing all the chests on the way. As soon as we reach the end, we run into the next fight against Vargas, and this one is a bit tricky as well. Before being able to target him, we need to take out the bears first. Auto crossbow and fire both do good damage, but the more dangerous part definitely comes from Vargas' Gale Cut, which deals roughly 50 AoE damage. Once the bears are done though, the battle is not too big of a matter, and soon we transition into the part with Sabin, and here I made another mistake. For some reason I thought I only need to use Raging Fist once in order to end the battle, but for some reason it wasn't working. It was only after a few attacks that I noticed that I need to deal a certain amount of damage first, before being able to end the fight. At this point, Sabin got Gale Cut out of his shoes, and we game over yet again. On attempt number 2, I did some damage with Aura Cannon first, and once the cutscene triggered, we can end the battle with Raging Fist. Sabin joins the party, and for the first time we get to have a full team of 4 people. We continue on until we reach the Returner's hideout. Luckily, we can raid all chests here without having to worry, before going through the scripted cutscenes. By declining Bannon's invitation 3 times, we get the Genji gloves instead of the rather useless gauntlets, and at this point the party will split up. Locke gets replaced by Bannon, and here is something that could be a huge problem. Due to the party not getting any experience, Bannon wins at level 2, and as some of you may know, if Bannon goes down at any given point going forward, it is an automatic game over. And if this wouldn't be bad enough already, he's also super squishy. Luckily the segment involving him is rather short, but the fight against Ultras could become a problem. The random encounters on the Lethe River are no issue for the most part. There is however a chance that the Lesser Lopros uses Fireball when getting low on HP, which one-shots the entire party. The only good thing about Bannon is Prey, which is a rather decent AoE heal that doesn't cost any MP, so that is something at least. With that, we head into the fight against Ultras. Edgar and Sabin are on attack duty with auto crossbow and aura cannon, while Terra heals or uses fire and Bannon is on auto heal. And here is the first big problem already. After the scripted attacks on Terra and Sabin, the boss will use an AoE tentacle attack that one-shots Bannon from the back row with full HP. While this sucks, we can still just throw a guard up in time to survive the attack. But we're not out of the blue yet. After his AoE tentacle, he goes for a couple of random attacks before a scripted single targeted tentacle against Bannon. And the problem here? Even with full HP from the back row and a guard up, Bannon is not able to take the hit. Considering he took 63 damage and has a total of 57 HP, I was hoping that this was a high damage roll, and maybe with some luck he could pull through, so I attempted this battle a couple of more times, unfortunately to no avail. There simply is no way that Bannon can take that hit, so what are our options now? The party doesn't do enough damage to beat Ultros before the attack, and because I am so smart and kept the Hermes Sandals on lock earlier, We don't have any access to auto haste either, though I doubt this would have even made any difference at all. Is the run already over before it even really started? Well, luckily no, because there is a way around this. In the Return as hideout, we grab the Knight's Code, which covers all physical attacks for party members in critical HP. So what exactly is our plan here now? Well, if we can get Bannon into critical HP before the scripted attack, the party member wearing the Knight's Code will take the hit for Bannon. If a party member goes down, we can just easily revive them with Phoenix Dance, but we need to protect Bannon at all costs. To test this out, I equipped the Knight's Code on Terra and went back at the fight again. The biggest problem is getting Bannon into critical HP to begin with, without killing him off. Critical HP starts at 1/8 of a party member's max HP, so in Bannon's case, that means we need to get him to 7 HP or lower. A single target attack to Bannon does about 20 damage, but unfortunately all those hit random targets. So ideally Bannon would need to get hit by Ultros once, and then the defending AoE Tentacle should do enough damage to put him into critical HP. And on my first attempt, this actually worked out perfectly. Terra goes down, but we can just revive her and continue on. The next problem isn't far away though, because right on the following turn, Ultros goes for another AoE Tentacle attack, and we game over yet again. Okay, so this is getting increasingly frustrating already. First of all, we have to hope that Ultros targets Bannon once between the start of the battle and the first AoE attack to get him into critical. Then we have to take Terra take the hit for Bannon, and immediately afterwards we need to heal to full and also defend to be able to take the second AoE Tentacle, all within a single turn. And additionally, every single time we game over, we also have to go through the forced encounters that are on the way to the boss, which might also wipe the party if we're getting unlucky. So yeah, it took me roughly 30 attempts of the boss until we reached the point where we are back with Bannon in critical HP with Terra guarding. We barely managed to get the defend in after healing up, and Bannon manages to survive the second AoE attack as well. The next couple of turns, Ultros will target random characters, so if we get unlucky, there is still a chance he could one-shot Bannon here. Luckily the boss does not have a lot of HP left anymore, and a couple of more attacks are enough to win the battle, and complete this segment with the party getting split from Sabin. Not going to lie, this was already incredibly stressful. Considering we're still in very early game, I really don't like where this is going at all. To be fair though, this is the only time in the game we have a party member that is not allowed to go down, so this may be a special occurrence. With that being said, we're now going through the 3 scenarios, starting with Terra, Edgar and Bannon. Since our main DPS is gone now, Edgar uses the Noise Blaster to confuse the lesser low pros to make sure we're not getting fireballed again. Once we make it to the end, we return to Narsh, and that is pretty much the end of the segment already. Again we ignore the chests, and this time make sure to unequip the entire party before meeting up with Arvis, and with that we're already done with scenario number 1. Up next is the solo lock scenario in South Figaro. We make our way through town, save Celes, and continue on towards getting out of there. Shoutouts to this surrounding attack here that gave me yet another game over. We loot all the chests and then try to get through South Figaro Cave. Again we ignore the chests, which is rather unfortunate because one of them would have a Thunder Rod in it that would make the next boss pretty much free. With that, we head towards the boss battle against Tunnel Armor. This battle is basically a tutorial for Runic. The boss uses all kinds of magic attacks that can be drawn by Celes. Tunnel Armor also goes for physical hits occasionally, which we can just heal up by throwing potions with Lock. And while this strategy seems rather safe, there is a slight problem with it. Celes ATB doesn't fill fast enough to guarantee a Runic every single turn. If the enemy gets another turn in before the next Runic goes off, the party is unprotected against all magic and this one-shots everybody. Now, one option to take care of that would be putting the Hermes Sandals on Celes, but considering that the scenario ends right after this fight, we're not getting another chance to unequip our characters. After screwing up earlier, I want to avoid having accessories be stuck on a character not available, so we try to get through the fight without them. I tried this one a couple of more times, but the result was always the same. Eventually, I noticed something though. The character's ATB bar continues to fill during the enemy's attack, so if the bar would increase slightly faster, this might give us enough leverage to consistently have a Runic up before the boss gets another attack in. Because of this, we switched the ATB speed to high and go into the fight, and this change worked out perfectly. Thanks to the increased speed, we can get enough ATB during the enemy's turn to constantly keep the runing up and avoid getting one-shot. The physical attacks the enemy does every now and then can easily be healed up with a potion from Locke, and while the battle does take quite a while, this is a very solid strategy, and we're able to eventually defeat Tunnel Armor and complete scenario number 2, which leaves us with only one more left to go, which is the longest one of the 3. We buy 99 Shuriken at the merchant and also a couple of ninja scrolls before recruiting Shadow into our party. With Blitztag and scrolls, we can deal full damage with both characters from the back row. We make our way towards the Imperial base before switching over to our newest party member Cyan, who's trying to avenge his family. And here is another example of low levels being a big problem. Usually the fight against the captain only takes a single turn. In our scenario, we barely got enough damage in time before the captain would have beaten Cyan. Back in the Imperial base, we again raid all the chests before approaching Kefka. After running away a couple of times, we grab the green beret from the chest and join Cyan in his fight against the soldiers. There isn't really much to say about this segment anymore, as it's just a couple of normal battles, so we skip ahead to the Phantom train. We recruit a ghost and make our way through the train, grabbing all chests until we reach the engine room. We stop the train and are about to head into the next boss battle, and here is the biggest tragedy of the entire run. Since we're not gaining any experience, Sabin didn't learn any additional Blitztags, which means we're not able to suplex the train. I'm sorry to tell you all, but no suplex means this run is invalid, no questions asked. If we can't even suplex a train, what is the point to continue on any longer? Anyways, we throw a Phoenix down on the train and win the battle. Once we reach Barren Falls, we make sure to unequip everything from Shadow, as he will be gone for a while now, before jumping down the Niagara Falls right into the next battle. We beat the first set of fish, and then battle the boss Rizo Pass. Not much to say here. We practically have the battle on auto with Aura Cannon and Fang, and after only a few attacks, the enemy is already gone again. We end the Moblets to buy a second Kotetsu for Cyan, as well as an Iron Armor and 2 Magus hats. After doing the side quest with the injured soldier, we grab some dried meat and then head into the Veld to recruit Gao. He appears in the very first battle, and after throwing him a bone, he joins the party as well. Now here is where it gets interesting. Gao can learn a ton of rage skills from enemies already defeated prior, which are going to appear on the Veld. This is also the reason why we went through the majority of random encounters so far, to make sure we're not accidentally missing out on anything important. But that's not the only thing. Not only can he use enemy skills by learning them in the Veld, he also inherits all elemental affinities from said enemy. This means he can have things like auto float, protect, or even elemental immunities. On the other hand, this also goes for weaknesses, so this is definitely a two-edged sword. Nonetheless, Gao is going to become our most powerful party member quickly. While we try to learn everything useful, the most important rages we focus on are the guard leader's Wind Slash, Oversoul's Will-O-Wisp, and other rages for status inflicting moves like Stop, Bio or Break. Luckily the formations on the Veld aren't random, but go in a specific pack order, and there is a great guide on game FAQs that makes forcing the battles you want to get rather easy. Let's just disregard the fact that I wasn't aware of this at first and ran around for 2 hours in the Veld trying to get useful skills onto Gao. Once we're done with everything, we enter the cave to find his most valuable treasure, and with that, we dive through the sea to get back to Norsh. The enemies on the way for the most part are not a big issue. The more important thing is that both Anguiform and Aspirant carry really strong spells with Aqua Breath and Gigavolt that we want to get on Gao later on. Once we made it through, we complete Sabin's scenario as well, and now reunite the entire party in Narsh again. With that, we are up against the first real Kefka fight of the game, and I was quite afraid of this one. From what I remembered, Kefka can use strong AoE magic, and if you remembered our previous encounters with magic, those usually didn't go so well. As for our party setup, we went with Sabin, Gao, Celes and Cyan. Celes Runic might be able to draw a couple of magic attacks in, and the other 3 are responsible for putting out damage. And because my timing is incredible, Cyan gets wiped right before the first runic goes off. Luckily we can easily bring him back, and once we set up everything, the strategy is working rather smoothly. Celes is constantly drawing all single target spells while the other 3 are putting out good damage numbers, and only a few turns later, the battle is already over again. Not going to lie, I was expecting this battle to be much harder, but if this run has already taught me something, it's that the hardest battles are those where you don't expect it. Anyways, Terra goes berserk and heads off to Zozo, so obviously the rest of the party is going to follow her. There isn't much to say about the battles on the way. We got a very solid setup with Locke trying to steal items, while the other 3 party members are putting out the damage. Gao is already pulling a lot of weight here and will most likely continue to do so. With that, we are up against that Illuma next. Just like before, we had 3 party members putting out damage, with Locke on standby, either healing or reviving characters if needed. After a while, the boss will summon 2 Iron Fists and also start healing. And this is probably the trickiest part about our setup. Both save and splits attacks, as well as Gao's rages, target random enemies and can't be controlled, so the attacks are all over the place. Ideally, I would have liked to focus on the adds first, but luckily even the random hits are not a big issue, and once the adds are down, the boss follows soon after. We meet up with Terra and Ramu, and now get our first set of magicites. And while we can't benefit from the level up bonuses, the amount of skills we can learn from those will greatly increase our options when it comes to party composition and setup. I also want to mention that I put AP gain and guild to ×4, just to cut down the amount of grinding needed, since this run is already brutal enough as it is. For the next segment, we are forced to use both Locke and Celis, so unfortunately Sabin has to stay on the bench for now. While his Blitz tech still does decent damage, Edgar's tools provide much more options when it comes to controlling enemy formations. And yeah, I don't think we need to talk about Gao. He is by far the party member with the most potential at the moment. Speaking of Gao, we actually returned to the Veld to get a couple of new spells before continuing on. During the water segment, we talked about Angry Form and Aspirant, and those are the skills we're going to grab now. Aqua Breath is going to be our strongest AoE option going forward, and Gigavolt does huge single target lightning damage. We also grab Heal Giga's Magnitude 8 in case we run into water immune enemies as well. As soon as we got all the skills needed, we continue on with the story as the Opera House is up next. After Celis pulls off an Oscar-worthy performance, we now have to stop Ultras from dropping the 4 tons of weight onto her. And this proved to be trickier than anticipated at first, because we have to go through several red encounters before that, and considering we're not doing a lot of damage, we actually get somewhat close on the time limit. Once we go through the cutscenes, we're up against Ultras again, and yeah, Tentacle hurts. Like, a lot. It also doesn't help that I accidentally selected the wrong rage in the beginning of the battle, so yeah, this was not the way I wanted the battle to go. On our second attempt, Lady Luck was on my side as I selected the correct rage this time around, and luckily Ultras also didn't wipe any party members. Gigavolt does huge damage, skipping several phases of the fight and straight up beating the boss before it can become any more dangerous. We get our newest party member in Setzer, and also get access to our first airship now. This opens up quite a bit of the game, but before we're able to start exploring, we have to head back into Vector and the Magitech factory. The first boss battle in here is against Shiva and Ifrit. Going in with 4 Reflect Rings on the party, there is not much that could potentially happen here as we reflect back pretty much all the spells. Considering we have a strong Fire Rage on Gao, but no useful source of ice damage, we try to focus down on Shiva. During Ifrit's turns, we usually just stall or try to heal up the party. Once Shiva appears, we go at her full force, and that is all there is to it. Eventually, we win the battle and get the next 2 Magicites. Shortly afterwards, the next boss fight against number 024 is up. Now, this is a boss that can become very tricky if you don't know what you're doing. The boss changes elemental affinities every 30 seconds, but luckily, we can just put it to sleep. With that, the battle is basically won already. Magic attacks don't wake the enemy up, so we just wait for Gao to slowly deplete the boss's HP. Eventually, Tapir will show up to cure the sleep, but we can just reapply it and continue on until the enemy is down and out. We go through the next couple of cutscenes, gain some more Magicites, and get betrayed by Celis before trying to escape the facility. The enemies throughout the escape hit hard, but are still rather manageable, that is, until we run into the final boss of this segment, number 128, and this one is a problem. Having 3 targets is not ideal already. Having them put out pretty decent physical damage is an even bigger problem, and if this wasn't enough already, Ned can put stop on a character, and this is pretty much a death sentence. Though we try to stay in the battle, it's only a matter of time until the party is down, and we game over yet again. Luckily for us, we just acquired the solution for this very problem with our newest Esper Phantom. Phantom puts the invisible status on every party member, which gives them 100% evasion on physical hits. Unfortunately, said status can be removed by a magic attack, but this might be the opening that we need. We can recast Vanish on party members that have the status removed to put it up again and then go to work on the boss. Considering we don't want to kill off the ads in this battle, we're going for manual spells rather than rage this time around to be able to focus all of our attacks on the boss. This strategy works out pretty well, and after a while the enemy is down, and we're finally out of Vector, but not out of the woods yet as our airship gets followed by 2 cranes, and here is where I made another mistake. For some reason I thought both cranes are weak to electricity, so I activated Esper on Gao, which was not a problem for crane number 1, who is actually weak to electricity. Unfortunately, the second one absorbs electricity damage, and Gao is putting out way more damage than the rest of the party, so we have to throw that attempt and retry again. On attempt number 2, we made sure to get the electricity weak crane down with spells, and once the first one is gone, we activate Bomb for Blaze damage. Blaze pierces the Magitech barrier so it can't be reflected, and the autofloat from the bomb helps protect Gao from the magnitude attack. Even though the rest of the party is down at this point, we only need Gao to fire off one more attack and get the victory to finally be able to explore the world with our airship. We grab Terra and Soso, and then head back into Norge to recruit Mog. Mog is actually the highest level party member at level 9, with him also having the highest amount of max HP, so he will serve as our tank, and I use that word very loosely, going forward for a while. We also head into the auction house in Shidor and grab the Sona Seeker and Golem Magus sites that are being sold off here as well. After collecting all of Mog's available dances, we head back into the Veld again to learn a couple of new rages. Chimera has an improved version of Aqua Breath for AoE damage, and we also get Cyclonic and Bio on Gao here. Once we're done with everything, we continue on with the main story by going to the sealed cave next. The enemies in here are free, since they are all undead, so holy waters can insta-kill them. This is a great opportunity to grind out AP and get all Espas onto our party members. Once we open up the seal, the Espas escape, destroy Vector, and we have a nice little dinner with Emperor Gestal, while the whole city is on fire. At the banquet, we also have to fight a couple of soldiers from the Empire, and depending on our performance, we will get a couple of events happening after. The 2 accessories for the Great and Perfect score are not that important, but we do want to get enough points for the army to abandon the sealed base, since you can grab quite a few useful items here. All of this wasn't even an issue though, since we can easily beat all enemies within the specified time frame. This was something that I remembered being way harder, but maybe over time I've just gotten used to the game's mechanics more and more. Nonetheless, once we're done, we're off to Tamasa next with only Locke, Terra and Shadow who decided to re-enjoy the party. Tamasa is the only town in the game where you can buy elemental rods, so we get a couple of each to break them later on. Using rods in battle makes them cast a strong spell of the specific element, so I'm sure they could become rather useful soon. We meet both Strago and Realm, and soon after the house is on fire, and we have to rescue little Realm now with Strago in our party as well. The balloons are weak to both ice and water. I know, surprising. 2 attacks are usually enough to take them out, but you gotta be fast since they can easily start wiping characters and give you yet another game over. Same thing goes for the boss Flame Eater, who will summon a couple of balloons as well. Locke and Strago will multi-target and try to get rid of the balloons, while Terra first uses Trance and then starts breaking ice rods over the boss. Unfortunately, we get unlucky here with back-to-back fireballs and game over yet again. On our second attempt, we get some more luck though, and after breaking a couple of rods over the enemy's face, core, center, whatever it is, the boss is down soon after. With Strago joining the party permanently and Realm gone now, we head into the Espa cave next, where we run into our good old buddy Ultros. This battle is not a big issue, it's just a couple of spells before the scripted part with Realm happens, and this is what almost drove me insane. Technically, you only need to hit Sketch with Realm once to immediately end the battle. And I don't know if it is because of her low level or because I got ridiculously unlucky, but Sketch kept missing over and over and over again to the point where I actually game over and had to try again. I counted a total of 11 failed sketches until it finally hit and we were able to continue on. Back in Tamasa, we now have to fight Kefka with General Leo, and here is another problem. Due to the party's low level, Leo is only on level 11 here, and the fight against Kefka is actually not as free as it normally should be. Especially the poison can be nasty and needs to be cured quickly. Firaga does like 200 damage, so you need to make sure you are capped on max HP during most of the battle. If you watch your HP though, the fight is still not that big of an issue, and eventually Kefka goes down as well. With that, there is only one more dungeon left in the World of Balance. Before we head there though, we still need to do a couple of things. First of all, we're going to learn a couple of blue magic spells for Strago. Among those is Traveler, and this is going to be pretty important because this will become the most important source of damage. The way Traveler works in this game is that it takes the amount of steps you have taken since the start and divides it by 32. So once you have taken a total of 319,968 steps, Traveler will always hit for max damage, and in a challenge run setting like this, fixed damage is the best possible thing that could happen to us. We also get level 4 Flare and level 5 Death onto Strago, and then are off to the floating continent with our setup of Strago, Mog and Gao. The first couple of fights are against Sky Armor and Spitfire, and there is a very specific strategy here because as you can see, you will quickly game over if you're not acting in time. The plan here is to use Siren to silence all enemies in battles and then put up Phantom's Ghostly Veil. At this point, the party is basically invincible. All enemies are muted and all physical attacks go nowhere thanks to the invisible status. While invisible is active through several battles, we always have to get up Lunatic Whiz quickly to mute the enemies before they get a chance to fire off the spells. After a couple of battles, we're off for our final encounter against our buddy Ultros, and this battle is pretty much free. Ultros exclusively uses physical attacks, so with invisible up, he can't harm the party at all. Once he calls in Typhoon, we immediately put up Silence and basically neutered both enemies now. After that, we just wait for Gao to take them down until the party gets blown off the ship. And this is where the real struggle starts. On our way down, we now have to battle the Air Force, and you can see how the first attempt went. One attack, boom, game over. On our second attempt, we were able to hold on a little longer, though the enemy attacks are still a huge issue. We break a couple of Thunder Rods to get rid of the ads, but the problem here is that once they're gone, the boss will summon a bit which draws magic attacks towards it, and then unleashes a big wave cannon that insta-wipes the entire party, and yeah, this is a problem. So either we only focus on the boss and deal with 3 enemies that will wipe the party sooner than later, or we try to get rid of them only for the bit to come out and annihilate the party. Considering Wave Cannon is not classified as a classic magic attack, Reflect Rings won't do anything here either. So what are we going to do here? Is the challenge run over for real this time around? Well, for all you cheeky guys checking how much video there is left, obviously this is not the end of the run yet, but this may be the biggest roadblock we've encountered so far, and I really don't see any way we can get through this fight with our current setup. I gave the battle a couple of more attempts, but they never went anywhere, so we have to make a change of plans. We reload an earlier save and head to Triangle Island. On there, you can encounter the Atagnir, the strongest enemy in the World of Balance. Atagnir will always start the battle being invisible and do nothing until you use a spell on it, at which point it will use Meteor before going back to being invisible again. Luckily there is a way around this. Atagnir is vulnerable to stop, so if you can keep it stopped, you can avoid a meteor into your face. The next problem is how to get damage in. The enemy pretty much dodges all physical attacks and is literally absorbing all elemental damage. This is where Traveler comes into play again. Traveler is classified as non-elemental magic, so this is the perfect means to deal damage to the enemy. Unfortunately, Stop has a decent chance of missing, and if the enemy breaks out of it, you will get meteored. At this point, we have to hope that somebody blocks the meteor and then recover before going back to dealing damage. Intagnir has 32,000 HP, so it is going to take quite a while to whittle it down, but eventually we get him down, at which point he will use one final meteor before we can win the fight. Once that is done, we head back to the Feld to get it to spawn and learn the rage spell associated with it. Now you may ask what Intagnir's rage spell is. Well, it is Transfusion, which insta-kills a character if it is used. This sounds pretty much useless, right? Well, not exactly. We briefly talked about Gao not only inheriting the skill of said enemy when using rage, but also its affinities, and if you remember from just before, Intagnir absorbs all elemental magic. So this way, Gao could pretty much become invincible against the boss as long as he doesn't use Transfusion. Luckily, there is also a way to avoid that. If we silence Gao, he will keep the elemental affinities from Intagnir, while at the same time being unable to cast Transfusion. This means that as soon as the battle against Air Force starts, we need Gao to cast Intagnir, while at the same time putting silence on him with another character. Once that is done, the battle is basically won. Gao is now invincible in this boss fight. The only non-elemental attack that is being used by the boss is Missile, which is percentage based and therefore cannot kill Gao. Unfortunately, the only way to get damage onto the boss now is if Gao uses a regular attack that deals like 90-ish damage. So we basically play the waiting game now and just leave the game running in the background until Gao slowly whittles down the enemy's HP. This battle took roughly 1.5 hours, and while I am aware that this strategy is ridiculously cheap, I think this may be the only way we can actually get through here. Once Gao has conveniently punched the boss into a slow and painful ending, we land on the floating continent and are now officially in the last dungeon of the World of Balance. There are 2 more enemy formations we want to get for rages, the first one being Behemoth, whom we can learn Meteor from. The second one would be ninjas, since they carry the water scroll attack. Unfortunately, those only spawn rarely, and if they do, they usually like to go first, immediately wiping the entire party, so those are probably out of reach. The first mini-boss is Gigantos, who exclusively uses physical attacks, so once again the invisible status pretty much makes this battle free. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the final boss in the World of Balance, Atma Weapon, or Ultima Weapon as it's called in newer versions of the game. Considering the boss uses a lot of single target magic attacks, we go into the battle with a Reflect Ring on everybody and then start doing damage breaking rods with Terra in trance mode, as well as Gao with Aspirant's Gigavolt. Mog and Shadow mostly serve as support, trying to keep the party alive while also dealing some damage every now and then. The strategy works pretty well until we enter the second phase of the fight, where the boss will use either Bio, Quake or Meteor on its first turn. Bio is the best option since it can be reflected. Quake and Meteor are potential party wipes, but that's not even the worst part yet. On turn 4, Ultima Weapon will use Mind Blast, which puts a random ailment on every party member, and because we get lucky, everybody but Gao gets petrified from this, so this is basically a wipe. And to top it off, after the Mind Blast, the boss fires off a Flare Star, and yeah, there is no surviving this. Considering the triple Petrify was rather unlucky, I went right back at the boss, but there's another thing we haven't mentioned yet. In phase 1, the boss can also use Blaze, which can't be reflected, and yeah, that is pretty much an insta-wipe as well. Oh boy, I don't like the looks of this. After the Air Force fight, I was hoping to have a couple of smoother boss fights, but seemingly this doesn't seem to be a thing. The next attempt made it back into phase 2, before being wiped by a meteor. So even if we make it into phase 2, there is a good chance that the first attack just straight up wipes the party, and if we somehow get through, there is still Mind Blast and Flare Star waiting, and we're not even talking about its attacks in phase 3 yet. Because of this, I came up with another idea. As you can see, we're now making use of the move Rasp. For those who don't know, Rasp drains the target's MP, and in FF6 there are certain bosses that can be killed by draining all of their MP. So by never damaging the boss's HP, we don't have to deal with the dangerous later phase attacks and can just drain him until he's down. And while that is a great idea in theory, unfortunately it doesn't work out that well. Like mentioned before, Ultima Weapon can still use Blaze during phase 1, and with the amount of rasps needed to beat the enemy, there is pretty much no way we can achieve that without getting a single Blaze. So what do we do now? Do we have to go back to cheap Intagner strats like just before? Well, this is always an option. I want to save this as a last resort if nothing else works. And considering Ultima Weapon can also use physical attacks, I am not sure this would even work anyways. After looking through the boss's AI again, I noticed that it is not immune to slow, so this could be the opening we need. While that is not a big game changer, it could give us enough leeway to potentially recover and save the fight. Once slow is up, we start going to work as usual. This time we're getting lucky as Ultima Weapon mostly uses physical attacks, which are much easier to recover compared to Blaze. After the transition to phase 2, we get Quake, which we're able to recover from, but unfortunately the Mind Blast puts Terra and Mog to sleep, as well as stopping both Gao and Shadow. And while no character can act at this point, this is probably the best pattern we've gotten so far, since sleep will automatically get healed by Tapir. At this point, the stop has also worn off just in time for Flare Star to hit and wipe everybody but Mog. I was pretty sure the battle was over at this point, but thanks due to Ultima Weapon hitting into our Reflect several times in a row, we were able to make a full recovery. We are already in the last phase of the battle, so we only need to get a couple of more hits in to win. Gao's Gigavolt, a couple of more Broken Rods, some more Reflects, and a Water Scroll from Shadow out of all things are enough, and eventually Ultima Weapon goes down and we successfully completed the World of Balance. Kefka takes control of the statues, we wait for Shadow to join us, RIP to all the first time playthroughs where Shadow didn't make it, and we officially enter the second half of the game with the World of Ruin. After saving Sid, we're off trying to get our party back together. Solo Cellus obviously is not going to pull a lot of weight in the beginning, so we're running from pretty much every encounter on our way for now. The first party member we're getting back is Sabin, who is holding on to an entire house by himself, while we now have to save the little boy that's still inside. The Scorpion encounter is rather hard to run from, so we usually use a smoke bomb here in order to get away in time. Luckily this segment does not have a boss, so once we rescued the boy, Sabin rejoins the party and we already doubled our party members. Even though the next part is optional, we're heading to Moblets, where we try to convince Terra to rejoin us. With that also comes the first fight against Humbaba. While this fight would probably be much easier with a full party, I am rather confident that we can win this one with only Cellus and Sabin as well. Cellus' role is to support from the back row, drawing magic attacks with Runic or healing up if necessary. Sabin goes double Poison Claw from the front row and tries to deal damage to the enemy. And while the timing is a little finicky, the strategy is rather solid and eventually we're able to get through the fight. Since Terra does not want to join us yet, we continue on and follow Jirai and his thieves to Figaro Castle, where to the surprise of absolutely nobody, he reveals himself as Edgar and we have to battle a couple of tentacles next. Again we go in with Reflect Rings equipped, as they use a lot of magic attacks that we can reflect back at the boss. The most important thing here is to get off Bioblaster as soon as possible. 3 out of the 4 tentacles can be poisoned, and this is probably our main source of damage since the poison ticks hit way harder than our current offense. Cellus should be on auto haste since she's mostly on healing duty. The tentacles can grab both Sabin and Edgar and drain their HP, though for some reason they never seem to take Cellus here, so she's the ideal healer in the setup. If Sabin and Edgar get turns in, we can use blitz tags or tools to deal some extra damage. Since the tentacles can also inflict physical damage, we need to make sure that Cellus is maxed out on her HP at all times in order to take the hit. Eventually the poison will take out the first 3 tentacles, and once we're down to the last one, we can just take it down with our party and easily win the battle. The last mandatory character we need to grab before the game opens up is Setzer, and this one is quite a bit easier since the only thing you need to do is talk to him. Before we get access to the airship though, we still have to get through Daryl's tomb. Luckily, pretty much everything in here is undead, so we can insta-wipe all enemies using holy water. The only non-undead enemy is Marlborough, which we can still insta-wipe using Break. The boss Dullahan is a little trickier. Dullahan has a couple of very nasty spells in his arsenal like Northern Cross and Absolute Zero. Luckily, there is an easier way to avoid those. Similar to Ultima Web before, the more dangerous attacks don't happen until later in the fight. In the beginning, the boss will only use single target magic attacks that we can reflect back right at it. And just like Ultima Web before, this is another boss we can MP kill. So we basically enter the battle with reflect rings equipped on everybody, and then wait until Dullahan runs out of MP eventually. At this point, a single rasp is all we need, and the battle is won. Definitely cheap, but I am kinda happy I got to show off rasp strategies in this challenge as well. That being said, we now have access to the Falcon, which means we can start collecting the remaining party members in the order of our choosing. After learning Sabin's ultimate blitz tag, we head into Triangle Island to get inhaled by Zone Eater and go grab Gogo. I'm not sure whether he will be useful or not, but I figure mimicking Traveler could be quite the damage source, so we'll quickly grab him. We return to Narsh to grab Mog, and then head into the Veld to get Gao back into the party as well. With that, we got pretty much the most important characters for now. Theoretically, we could already head into the final dungeon now, but considering I wanna grab all characters since they might be useful, and we also need the extra steps to power up Traveler anyways, might as well get the step counter up doing something useful. Speaking of useful, we get the Fafnir encounter on the Veld, which is one of the enemies whose rage includes Traveler, since this is going to become our main source of damage going forward. Before continuing on recruiting party members, we make a quick detour to the Colosseum. We want to grab a Minerva Bustier here, which is the best armor for both Celis and Terra. This is done rather easily by betting the Regal Gown and sending in a character with a reflect ring. The incoming death will swiftly be reflected and we win. Now, why is this piece of armor so important? Well, it nullifies fire, ice, lightning and wind damage while halving all other damage types. Not only that, but it also comes with an additional plus 10 magic evasion, so going forward, Celis might become our top tank due to the amount of attacks she can now take. With that, we head back to Moblitz to once again battle Humbaba. The first battle is relatively easy. Traveler does decent damage, and considering the boss only does single target attacks, recovery is not an issue. Once we get him down to half HP, he will blow random party members away though, and then we restart the battle with the two remaining party members and Terra. Ideally, Celis and Gao stay in the battle for runic and damage, and because I love to get lucky, of course those two get blown away on the first attempt. Needless to say, with this setup we're not getting anywhere, and game over shortly after. The second time, Celis makes it through, but without Gao we don't really have a decent means of dealing damage to the boss. Third time's the charm, and we get lucky enough to get both Celis and Gao into the final battle, and this is the setup that we were looking for. Celis, just like before, tries to draw magic with Runic, while Gao does damage with Traveler. Both Gao and Celis don't take damage from lightning attacks, so this makes the battle quite a bit easier as well. Terra is on standby, trying to heal and break a couple of rods when she has the chance to do so. With this setup, we can get through the fight, and once Humbaba is down, Terra finally rejoins the party as well, and we can continue on. We return to Narsh one more time, since there are still a couple of things to do here. The first one being the first dragon fight against the Ice Dragon. We will try to beat all legendary dragons, since a lot of them have real good drops that we want to use. The Ice Dragon battle is pretty much free. Luckily, it is not immune to Confuse, so we can keep it perma-confused thanks to Edgar's Noise Blaster, and then just whittle on the enemy until it's down and drops a Force Shield. While the Force Shield doesn't have any physical evasion on it, it comes with a whopping 50 magic evasion. Not only that, it also has all elemental damage and also comes with Auto Shell. We also have the battle against Voligermander, but once again this one is easy with reflect rings, as the enemy only attacks with single target magic. And since we're already here, might as well jump down into the Yeti cave. There is a specific monster in the box encounter against 3 Tomberry that we want to do here. The fight itself again is free with the combination of Invisible and Silence, but what we're looking for here is a second Minerva Bustier. Each Tomberry has a 1 in 8 chance to drop one of those, so if my math is correct, we should get at least one within 3 encounters. Well, let's just say we had to do the battle a total of 10 times until we finally got the drop, but it's definitely worth it, considering we can now also equip it on Terra. Last but not least, we have the battle against the Yeti here. And once again, status elements make this quick and easy. We go in with invisible on everybody and then put berserk on the enemy. With that, he literally cannot hit the party any longer and we can get an easy win. Umaru himself is a rather useless party member, but if we're already here, might as well grab him as well. Up next is a quick visit to the cultist tower, not yet for the boss, but rather for the items that we can grab on the way. We also battle the second legendary dragon here as we fight the holy dragon. This is another fight that is pretty much free considering you can put silence on the boss and therefore make it unable to do anything. Unfortunately, we can only use magic in the cultist tower, so the battle does take quite a while, but we're never in any danger and eventually dragon number 2 goes down as well. We're not going to fight the main boss here yet since I want to grab the phoenix for re-raise before, so we leave and head to the cave on the Veld next, where we meet Interceptor. The boss here is the Behemoth King, who can once again be cheesed with ailments. This time it is Imp that we can cast on the enemy to prevent all incoming damage in combination with Invisible. While the boss casts Imp on itself to negate the status, we can just reapply it and then continue on. Once the Behemoth King is down, we get back attacked by the undead Behemoth King, who can be insta-killed with a holy water, and with that we rescued Shadow and recruited the next party member to our team once we battle him at the Colosseum. Fun fact, you don't actually need to win the battle to get him to rejoin the party, all you have to do is battle him. The weapon we would get for winning isn't really needed anyways, so it's not like we have to force a victory here or something. And since we are already here, we bet the Behemoth suit we just got before to get a Snow Scarf. The Snow Scarf not only is Gao's ultimate armor, it also absorbs ice and halves fire damage while having the highest defense of any armor in the entire game. The +10 to both physical and magic evasion certainly are rather useful as well. While it does take a couple of attempts, eventually we get through the fight thanks to a lucky break. Up next, we head to Soso as we're trying to get Cyan back into the party. On the way there, we also encounter the Storm Dragon. Unlike the previous 2 dragon encounters, this one cannot be cheesed so easily. The Leaf Swirl attack is unblockable and pretty much insta-kills the entire party, so at the moment we have no way to get through this battle. I did attempt this fight a couple of times, but without any luck. The drop here is not so important, but we might still come back to beat the dragon once we get re-raise on our party. Since there are no mandatory boss battles in here, we can just talk to Cyan and recruit him back before continuing on. And considering we talked about the Phoenix Magicite a couple of times now, it might just be the best time to get it next, as we had to get Locke into our party as well. We head into the Phoenix Cave, but there isn't much to talk about here. We run from the majority of encounters, especially with our B team. Once the party is reunited, we're also off to battle the next legendary dragon as well. Red Dragon, similar to a lot of the other dragon fights, can't be cheesed with status elements. Edgar's Noise Blaster is an auto-hit confusion, and with that we basically already neutralized the boss. Mog helps out with some water magic, but other than that it's just Traveler and keeping confusion on until the enemy is down. The Murakumo as a reward is not really that useful, but might as well take it. Shortly afterwards, we find Locke, watch the cutscene with Rachel, and finally get our Phoenix Magicite. Phoenix is going to be the most important S-bar since it carries re-raise, which will become very important later on, so we want to get that onto everybody quickly. Up next is Alza's Mansion, where we can get Realm back. The mini-boss is against 2 Misty. Again, we unsurprisingly work with Traveler, but we're getting to a point where we probably have to grind steps rather soon, considering its damage is rather low compared to the enemy's HP. This becomes even more apparent when battling Shardanuke. Goddess form starts off antising Mog, and this is basically a perma-confuse until either the caster or the target goes down. Once the boss switches into demon form, we can get a total of 5 hits in before she switches back again. This time Salus is helping Gao with the damage since the fire weakness makes Firaga deal decent amounts of damage as well. Mog is actually becoming pretty annoying here since he likes to heal the boss rather often, which makes things even trickier. The fact that he also absorbs the boss's lightning attacks doesn't make this much better either. Not only that, but he also likes to use Wind Slash against the party, and as you can see this is becoming pretty dangerous. Eventually, I decided to kill Mog off with Celis, and once we bring everybody back, it's only a couple of more attacks until the boss is down as well. Up next is the Ancient Castle. We don't get any new party members here, but we can get a couple of new magicites, as well as another legendary dragon fight. We also have done a little step count grinding to get our traveler damage up. I actually got no idea for how long I was running around mindlessly, but we made it up all the way to 190,000 steps, which results in a bit more than 5,800 damage. If I had to take a guess, this probably took around 2 to 3 hours, but this should be enough for now at least. Eventually we obviously want to max out Traveler, but we still have some stuff to do in terms of story content, so we'll naturally get our step counter up a little more anyways. The first fight here is against Samurai Soul, who is technically optional, but if we're already here, might as well. It takes a couple of attempts to get through this battle, since the enemy's water scroll basically one-shots the entire party, but once we get a lucky turn 1, it's an easy battle since we can again confuse the enemy to make this battle free. Afterwards, it's just more Traveler for the win. We pick up Odin and then head into the battle against Blue Dragon. The enemy starts the battle off with Tsunami, which insta-wipes everybody but Edgar. Luckily, we're able to get everybody back up again and then start doing damage with Traveler. Unlike most of the other dragons, there is no cheesing mechanic in this battle that I know of, so it's just trying to grind out a victory with Traveler, while keeping every other party member alive as good as somewhat possible. Luckily the party is able to guard a lot of attacks thanks to the equipment we have picked up during previous dungeons, so this definitely helps a lot. After that, it's just a couple of more Travelers until the next dragon is down. As a reward, we get the Santensuken, another drop that isn't really any useful in our setup, but we'll take it. We convert Odin into Raiden, and then leave again since there is nothing left to do here. Considering pretty much everybody learned Re-Raise at this point, we return to the Cultist Tower to fight the boss. Magic Master is basically free as it only attacks with elemental magic, so Reflect Ring on everybody makes the entire party invincible. The reason why we needed Re-Raise here is that once the boss goes down, he casts Ultima, which deals like 8,000 damage to the entire party, and Re-Raise is pretty much the only way we're able to survive here since Ultima is also unblockable. Once the boss is down, we return with Realm to slap some sense back into Strago, and back on the airship we bring Cyan into our party. He is pretty much useless, but he is mandatory for the upcoming segment, so we leave Mog back for now. We head to Doma Castle, go to sleep, and then enter the mind of Cyan. Once we picked up all our party members and made our way through the labyrinth, we fight the first boss fight here, the Dream Stooges. And you might have already guessed it, we can once again make this fight a lot easier thanks to ailments. We silence Laragorn, put Curlex to sleep, and Berserk Mobius. After putting Invisible on everybody, we're now pretty much invincible, so we can once again use Traveler to take them down one by one. Thanks to Tapir, we need to reapply sleep occasionally, but otherwise there is nothing that is of any danger here, and after a while all three of them are down, and we continue on until we reach the final boss of the segment, Rex Soul. And needless to say, this one is a nightmare. Not because it's so difficult, but rather because it is ridiculously annoying. Rexol will use Fury to possess a character and will not reappear until said character is dead. The problem with this is you don't actually know which party member got targeted, so you can only guess and wipe them one by one. The even bigger issue here, both Celes and Terra are equipped to have very high magical evasion, so we have a lot of issues killing them off with death or other stuff since they block the majority of spells. The Soul Savers themselves meanwhile can't really do much, and Gao regularly gets rid of them with Traveler while we try to wipe our own party members. Eventually we were able to get both Celes and Terra down, and of course Rexol possessed Gao. After wiping him and bringing him back, we were finally able to deal some damage to the boss. Unfortunately though, not enough until he uses Fury once again, and the game starts all over. It went so far that eventually I decided to just remove the force shield from Terra in order to hit death easier after both Celes and Gao were already put down earlier. Luckily this time around, we were able to get the boss down before he went for Fury for a third time, and with that we successfully completed the last segment that was still left. We pick up the Alexander Magicite and are now pretty much ready to storm Kefka's tower. Before doing that though, We return to Mount Soso to get revenge on the Storm Dragon. With everybody now having access to re-raise, we should be able to complete this battle, but the boss really doesn't go easy on us, as it again immediately starts with Leaf Swirl to wipe the entire party. We basically need a good turn 1 to get the re-raise casts going, and once everything is set up, we should be good. While Leaf Swirl is an insta-wipe, the party can pretty much take everything else. And while it still takes a couple of tries, eventually we get a pattern where we are lucky enough to barely get any Leaf Swirls, and we're able to beat the strongest legendary dragon. We received the Force Armor and are now ready to blast into Kefka's castle for real. Actually, no, not yet. We quickly stop by the Opera House because there is another legendary dragon waiting there. The Earth Dragon is one of those that can easily be cheesed again, this time with sleep. Thanks to Tapir, we once again have to regularly renew the status, but other than that, the fight is free and the last dragon on the overworld is down soon after. But wait, there is still one more thing we have to do. We head back into Narsh to enter the weapon shop where we get to choose between the Ragnarok Sword or Esper. Considering the Esper is pretty much useless to us, we choose the sword. But we will not actively use the sword. Instead, we head into the Colosseum again and bet the Ragnarok in order to get a Lightbringer. It takes quite a few attempts until we're finally able to beat Daedalus with Banish, but the reward is definitely worth it. The Lightbringer not only comes with a lot of extra attack, it also has plus 50 for both physical and magical evasion, making the party member wearing it the ultimate tank. With this setup, Celis has 87 physical and 119 magical evasion, so I think we're ready now. Before heading into Kefka's castle for real this time, we also do our last step grind to finally reach the roughly 320,000 steps needed to max out the damage of Traveler. This took like another 3 to 4 hours, but considering we're now heading into the final dungeon of the game, the grind didn't feel all too bad. Okay, now we're actually ready to storm into Kefka's castle for real. Now you might think that since we have to split our party into 3 different teams that this might be a huge issue considering we only have one real DPS character, but luckily there is once again a way around this. The way we are going to approach this is that we're putting our A team onto one of the teams, get through all the boss fights on that part, and then just teleport out of the dungeon. Once that is done, we put our A team into the next party and try to get through the bosses again until we have beaten them all. Starting off with the first team, the first boss we have to go through is Ultima Buster, who once again is technically optional, but we want to get through all the bosses here if we're already at it. Ultima Buster can use all kinds of elemental damage, as well as Tsunami, Quake and Meteor. For Quake we can put Float on all characters to negate that. For everything else we have re-raise that should hopefully help in case we run into bigger issues. As for damage, we unsurprisingly set up Traveler and then hope for a nice and quick win. We get the Quake that I was worried about, but luckily everybody but Mog already had Float applied. The Tsunami wipes both Mog and Gao, as does the Quake right after. Luckily Gao had already queued up Traveler, so as soon as he gets revived, he fires it off and we win the battle on our first attempt. Up next is the second to last of the legendary dragons with Gold Dragon. While we can't necessarily cheese this boss, with access to re-raise and the maxed out Traveler as well as great elemental coverage, the enemy is not a big issue anymore. In fact, the boss doesn't even get a single point of damage onto the party before going down already. With that, we teleport out, switch parties again, and then head back in for the next couple of boss fights. Inferno is similar to number 128 we fought in the Magitech laboratory earlier in the game, as it comes with 2 ads that can be ridiculously annoying. The ads like to spam both single target and AoE physical attacks, which is already a problem in itself. The even bigger issue though is that once one of the ads is down, Inferno has a 33% chance to cast Meteor until both ads are revived, and as you can see, this is quite the problem seeing as we can't control the targeted enemies with Rage. But even without Meteor, this battle is rather tough. Metal Cutter often one-shots several characters, and even with re-raise on, recovery is really hard and oftentimes pretty much impossible. Delta Attack is another attack that can cause issues since it petrifies the target, but this can be prevented by equipping accessories with immunities. One thing I noticed after a couple of failed attempts is that all parts of the boss can be slowed, and the arms can even be stopped, so that should give us some leeway to set up and start doing damage. As soon as the arms respawn, we can just put stop back on and continue doing damage. In the end, this was the strategy that brought us the victory. Even though the entire party got wiped on a meteor, we were able to recover thanks to re-race and get a win in our first attempt with slow and stop strategies. Up next is the very last legendary dragon with Skull Dragon. Even though it looks like it might be undead, holy water strats don't work here, so we just go to work with Traveler as per usual. The boss can occasionally doom a character, but otherwise it really doesn't do much, and after a few Travelers the battle is already won, and we receive the Crusader match aside for beating all the dragons. Neither Meltdown, or Murden as I still like to call it, nor Meteor are really any useful, but if we already got it, might as well try to learn them. With that, we head into the next boss fight against Guardian. Guardian can mimic previous bosses like Ultras, Dedaluma, or even Air Force and Ultima Weapon, who we had huge issues with early on for those that remember. Unlike before though, we do have access to re-race now, so that should definitely help out a ton. Case in point, the Ultra's tentacle attack that wipes the entire party, but luckily we already had the first few re-races set up and were able to easily recover. After the boss set up Dedaluma's attack pattern, I was starting to sweat a little bit, but luckily Gao was able to fire off the final Traveler attack before worse things could happen. In theory, both Celis and Terra would have been immune to the attack anyways, but I'd rather not find out the hard way. With that, we are now ready to tackle the 3 god statues, starting with Demon, and considering we haven't had a cheesable boss fight in a while now is a good time for those to return. Demon is vulnerable to stop, and yeah, I don't really think I need to say anymore. We throw out regular stops to keep the enemy down, while Gao chips away at its HP with Traveler until it's dead. Not really much to say about this battle. Up next is the battle against Fiend, and while this one is not vulnerable to stop, we can still use slow to give the party a little bit leeway in case things go south. Fiend mostly focuses on ice magic, as well as attacks that can apply the frozen status. Other than that, it is not a huge issue. If you make sure all your party members null or absorb ice, there isn't much that the boss can do, and in case somebody gets frozen, you can thaw them by using a weak fire spell. Gao getting frozen several times is unlucky, but nothing really too dangerous. Towards the end, the boss starts to single target characters and wipe them with physical attacks, but since those are only single target, it can easily be recovered from, and after a while the Fiend also falls prey to the almighty Traveler. The final statue fight is against Goddess, who on paper looks like it's gonna be a cakewalk again. She mostly focuses on lightning attacks, so by equipping the correct equipment, we can once again completely negate the incoming damage. Unfortunately, she can also use Quasar, which is an unblockable AoE magic attack, and since I didn't even feel the need to put up re-race, we game over here. On attempt number 2, I came prepared and re-raced the entire party, and of course this time we make it through the battle without even getting hit a single time. And yeah, that is pretty much it everybody. We made it all the way to the final boss, but this doesn't mean that we're done with the game at all, because the final boss fight can be quite tricky. As most of you know, the battle consists of 4 phases in total. First against the 3 statue parts, and then against Kafka himself. Tier 1 consists of 3 targets. Target B can be insta-killed using Death, and Target A can be slowed down, so that already gives us some extra time to work with. We also start putting re-race on everybody and then go to work. Remember, we absolutely must have all party members alive by the end of each tier, since they will get swapped out with the reserve party otherwise, which we want to avoid at all costs. Well, one thing I forgot is that tier 1 can cast Quake if part C is the last one that is killed off. Luckily, we had re-race on everybody, but this already makes this a bit more tricky. Tier 2 consists of 4 parts in total. Again, we can insta-kill part E with Death, and completely negate part D by putting silence on it. The biggest issue in this tier is definitely the amount of incoming physical attacks. Elemental wise we are set up rather well, but physical attacks can still easily screw with the party, so more often than not we have to recast re-race some party members. Luckily we have a huge stash of Ethers and Phoenix Downs, so we should be fine for the most part. Just like before, unfortunately I forgot that the chi part also has a 10-hit physical attack that it does when it goes down, and that is quite the issue even with the party being able to block several hits. The even bigger issue here though, is that we seems to have soft locked the game. Earlier in the battle, Gao was briefly alive with 0 HP before everything continued on like normal. At first I thought it was a visual bug or that the HP didn't update fast enough, but it seems that whatever it was, it caused a soft lock once the tier is completed. I have no idea how I did that or what caused it, so if anybody knows what the issue is, feel free to let me know in the comments. So yeah, attempt number 1 ended due to an unlucky soft lock, but that doesn't stop us from just reloading the game and head in for attempt number 2. The start of the battle is just like before, though this time we put float on the entire party to dodge the eventual quake. Tier 2 is also the same as before. This time part G went down before F, so we could easily recover from the 10-hit attack before advancing to tier 3. On the final tier we only have 2 targets, part H that exclusively heals or puts ailments on, and part I that is doing the damage. Part H only has 9999 HP, so a single traveler is able to take it down. The much bigger problem is part I. The casual attacks like Meltdown or so are no issue at all, but once the enemy drops below 10,240 HP, it will start spamming Meteor until either the enemy or the party is dead. And while we do in theory have a chance to block the Meteor, we are not really getting any lucky at first. When it looked like we were gonna wipe, we blocked 3 Meteors in a row, and once everybody is back, Terra and Mog get wiped again, while Gao goes for the final Traveler, which means we won't have access to them for the final fight against Kefka. And needless to say, this is not going to happen with Sabin and Edgar taking their place. Neither has learned Re-Raise, nor do they even have enough max MP to cast it to begin with. But even if we won't win, we can at least check out Kefka's AI pattern. Kefka will always start the battle using Heartless Angel, which puts all characters to 1 HP. Afterwards, he will either cast single target magic attacks, or physical attacks, or use Shrine. Shrine is the best case scenario since it only puts blind and silence on all party members that are not immune to it. Kefka has a total of 62,000 HP, so we need to hit Traveler for a total of 7 taps. Once he drops below 32,640 HP, he will start charging up for his special attack Forsaken, which is an unblockable AoE magic attack that is a guaranteed wipe, so we definitely need Re-Raise on all our character when this happens. Once that is done, he will use 2 normal attacks before charging up for Forsaken yet again, so at this point we need to complete the battle fast before he ends the party. The boss mostly goes for physical attacks here, which is a big problem since we can't consistently guard those. After the second Forsaken, we don't have the manpower any longer to keep up with Kefka's attacks, and eventually game over. Not surprising considering we only had half of our A-team available, but that doesn't stop us from going back in again to give it another shot. The biggest issue still was the amount of physical attacks from Kefka between the Forsaken charges. This gave me an idea though. Gao already has really high defense thanks to the Snow Scarf, so if we can get him to 255 defense, every physical attack will do a maximum of 1 damage to him. Combine that with the Knight's Coat that we got earlier that shields all characters in critical HP, this could be a great way to mitigate incoming physical damage, even more so considering Gao doesn't do much other than auto traveler spam anyways. We equip the Genji helm and the Mithril glove for the last bits of defense, and then head back into the battle. Now we're not going to cover all tiers again since it's pretty much the same every time, but let me just say that my strategy didn't quite work like I intended it to. While Gao does shield characters in critical HP, he only does so as long as his rage isn't up. Once we put up the rage for traveler spam, the guard doesn't seem to work any longer, so this strategy is pretty much useless. We made it back to Kefka on the following attempt, but unfortunately this time Repose hit Mog, who didn't have Re-Raise back on, so again we're only 3/4 of our A-team at the end. Luckily, Mog is probably the one we can live without the best, so maybe we have a chance this time around. Gao does a great job tanking the first couple of physical hits, and we go to work using Traveler again while making sure that everybody is re-raised. But as soon as we get hit by the first Forsaken, the fight quickly breaks apart again. Just like before, physical hits hit the party hard, and after the second Forsaken, Gao is the only one still alive. And while he made a valiant effort, the third Forsaken takes him out and we game over yet again. So while the guard strategies on paper seems nice, it's not gonna help us a lot. This got me thinking though. Mog can also equip the Snow Scarf and probably hit max defense even easier, but we only got one of those and I really don't want to remove it from Gao since he needs it as well. If only there was a way to get a second cut. Oh wait, there is. We can bet the Behemoth suit in the Colosseum to get another Snow Scarf. And since we got a drop from both the regular Behemoth and the Undead Behemoth, we don't even have to grind that and can head straight into the Colosseum. Once again, it took a couple of attempts before we got a lucky Banish cast, but once that is done, we gain our second Snow Scarf, which we can now slap on Mog. And since Mog already maxes out on defense just from the Snow Scarf and the Genji Helm, we are rather flexible when it comes to his accessories, so we can leave the ribbon on and just equip the Knight's Coat. Thanks to the ice immunity of the Snow Scarf, we can also equip another Flame Shield on Mog to make him fire immune as well. With those changes, we head back into Kefka's tower and give the final boss another try. And while the first tiers went as usual, I quickly want to show off parts of tier 2 here. If you remember earlier, we were talking about how we need a lot of ethers and phoenix downs due to constant reviving after physical hits. Well, that is not a problem any longer. After getting revived once, all party members are in critical HP, which lets Mog cover all of them, not only saving MP on phoenix downs, but also drastically improving the time needed to get through tier 2. Tier 3 once again gave us issues towards the end with the constant meteor spamming, but for the first time, we actually made it to Kefka with our full A-team still alive. This time around, we also have a much easier time staying alive due to Mog blocking all Havoc wing attacks. Once the first Forsaken happens, we try to recover, which is now much easier thanks to the blocking of physical attacks. Here is where another issue arose though. After the second Forsaken, Kefka started spamming Meteor and immediately wiped the entire party. Looking through Kefka's AI pattern again, I noticed that once he drops below 7680 HP, he will use Meteor and then immediately charge up for another Forsaken, so at this point it's basically RIP, no questions asked. So how can we avoid this? The boss has a total of 62,000 HP, meaning that we need a total of 7 Travelers to beat him. After 5 Travelers, he will have 12,005 HP left, which isn't quite enough to beat him yet, and another Traveler will put him to 3,006 HP left, at which point he will start spamming Meteor and Forsaken and immediately wipe the party. The easiest solution to this is to hit for another 2k and some change damage within the first 5 Travelers in order to get him below 10k max HP, but still above the 7680 threshold where he starts spamming Meteor and Forsaken. The easiest way to do this is by breaking a couple of rods and then go for the final shot to win the battle. I'm not really a big fan of mathing out battles before, but this one is rather easy compared to what we previously went through on other videos, so this should be no problem at all. Well, on the next attempt we went back in and again lost Mog at the end of the 3rd tier. All of this didn't even matter though, because once again I managed to softlock the game after a re-race. I am legitimately curious what is causing this. I am pretty sure this is something in combination with re-race. Either way, there is nothing we could do once that happens other than restarting and try again. On the very next attempt, we made it back to Kefka with the full party, and once again start going in for damage while guarding his physical attacks with Mog. Since almost everybody still has re-race on, we try to break the rods early in the battle when most characters still have 3 turns to use. The Holy Rod deals around 1200 damage, while the Ice Rod only does about 750-ish, so for safety reasons we use 2 of those. Now it's just a matter of hoping we get a lot of Traveler hits without getting too unlucky. We get hit by Forsaken once, manage to recover, and because we have gotten really lucky with our Travelers, we are able to hit the last attack on Kefka before the second Forsaken ever happens. And that is it, everybody. We beat Final Fantasy VI without ever gaining a single point of experience on the entire party. This was probably one of the most fun challenges I've done in recent times, as it was a great mix of solid strategies combined with bits of RNG here and there. I didn't actually think I'd be able to get another video out in 2024, considering it's only been 5 weeks since I posted the previous challenge, but here we are, so I hope you all enjoyed the final video of this year. I got a lot of things planned for 2025, so I hope you all stick around and watch the channel grow to hopefully even greater heights. With that being said, special thanks go out to this video's top supporters Novarel, Shurka and Laura Nemeth. Becoming a channel member or joining the Patreon gives you 48-hour early access to all videos, among other small perks. Again, a big thanks to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video, and for all of you still watching at this point. That is it for me this time. I hope I'll see all of you again next time as well. Until then, take care.